Hello! Great to see you. If you wonder why I'm standing here on my front doorstep, it's fairly windy outside. And also, last week I had the real entertainment of the Wi-Fi just not being quite good enough, and it dropped off, and I had to come back inside the house. So I'm thinking that today I'm just going to turn the camera around and show you what it looks like out here. So you can see it's windy. You can hear cicadas. They're pretty loud. And everything's blowing. This is I don't know how well you can see it, but down here is what I managed to do in the weekend. See that bare ground? I cleared it. Pest plants in there, and there aren't any more. I'll have to go back in a few times. There's a bit missing at the bit still there at the back that I didn't get to. But yeah, this is the garden. And in case you're wondering why I'm talking about thoughts and feelings and changing how we think and feel, and yet I'm talking about the garden, it's because when I'm going live, it takes a little while for the live to come up, and it takes a little while for my husband to share it out to the groups, and I'd like to give people a chance to come and jump on with me live. So that's why I'm doing this. And here's the view of the lily bed from on top. That's something you don't normally get to see. You can see the lilies are mostly finished, but there's some new ones that have come out the back there. And so, yeah, this is the garden, and it's windy, but it's a different view just to show you from on top. See the roses and the dahlias, and yeah, it's summer here, but there it is. I just really enjoy watching the cherry tree. I've gone out too far, isn't it beautiful? It's just lovely to watch it moving. It's just lovely to see it moving in the wind. I enjoy that very much. So, and let me show you the sky. You can't see the sky at the same time as you can see the trees, so let me just show you the sky. Now you can watch the clouds. They're not exactly drifting, they're blowing. It's windy up there. But if you look at this part of the sky, there's another layer where everything's still. So, yeah, that's the outside world today. And now I'm going to go inside. Shrink the camera down, okay. And get going. Tell you what I've been doing today. Writing. Obviously, I'm not going to talk while I'm right by the wind chimes at the door, because they are noisy. Right, here I am, inside, in the lounge, where it's quiet, and I can get going. Alright, so, what did I do this week? Well, I didn't, you know how I say I generally just go back to where I left off last week and carried on? I didn't do that, but unlike last week where I went back and I thought, oh my God, there's a ton of holes in here and I've got to fill in gaps and, sort stuff out. It wasn't like that this week. I just thought, no, this is good. I mean, I just read a little bit and thought, this is fine. I'm into new territory. And there's always a feeling in my mind when I'm thinking, hang on a minute. Oh, okay, breathe deep. Got to start doing something new now. So the one piece that I did change, that I did from last week, one moment, was a piece and I got a little biological. G'day, sweetie, I can see you're on Facebook. Showed me your little face for half a second. It's lovely to have you with me. So I got a little biological last week because I decided to have a little bit of detail, and I talked about how if you think a fearful thought, and it's got to be strong enough for you to, notice it, or something happens in your world and you react, that you have the thought and there's a neurotransmitter in your brain called glutamate, which your brain uses to get a fearful thought from one neuron to the next, to the next, to the next. Hello, lovely people. It's great to see you coming on. And so you have glutamate in your brain, and the glutamate signals another part of your brain, which is called the hypothalamus, and that sends signals to the pituitary, and the pituitary sends out, hi, Laurie, The pituitary sends out this thing called corticotropic releasing hormone, CRH. I just call it CRH because the big long words are, they're off-putting for lots of people. And what CRH does is it goes to our adrenal glands, which sit on top of our kidneys like little hats, and they pump out adrenaline. Now most people have heard of adrenaline. It's the primary stress hormone. It's the one that makes you run fast and fight or whatever you need to do. Primary stress hormone doesn't last very long in the body. It sort of hangs around for a minute or two, but it gives you this massive boost of energy. That's adrenaline. And I talked last week. I explained about the effects that adrenaline has in the body. So it makes the pupils of your eyes dilate, so you're looking and you're seeing really well. And it shuts down your digestion, because if you've got to run away from a tiger, you don't need to digest your food. And it takes all of the blood flow goes away from the thinking part of your brain, and instead is directed into the instinctual part of your brain, which is the back here, and also in the middle, where the chemical brain is, the survival brain. So there's a change of blood flow in your brain. And the adrenaline hits your heart, and then your heart starts to beat faster, and your blood pressure rises, and all of that, and your respiration increases too, and even the little passageways in your lungs, they dilate. All of that happens with adrenaline because you need air more to get to your muscles, because you're going to run, fight or hide. And the blood flow, instead of going to your internal organs and digesting your food and running your immune system and everything else and helping you to think creatively, is going to the parts of your body that are responsible for running, fighting or hiding. That's what the survival response does. And then I thought, well, it is so fascinating. I love being able to unpack it really simply for me and for anyone else that finds it fascinating as we do. So that's what happens. And I thought, but how is a person going to relate to that? I mean, really, what does that mean? It's still all stuff about what happens in your body. So then I thought, okay, because when we have a thought that affects us like that, and remember I said it's got to be strong enough, and this is a minor thing, it's like, oh, whatever. There's got to be something that is enough to cross a threshold that we would react, or that our body would respond, and then we would react. But if that happens, and that chemistry flows, there are those effects. But how does that actually feel like? How do you know? Well, that twisting feeling that you get in your gut, when your gut sort of goes, when you're responding to something, or that, that prickling feeling that you get in your middle, that is the feeling of the blood vessels being shut down, because the blood is being diverted to your arms and your legs so that you can run away. That sudden feeling, oh my God, I can't think. It's because you can't think, because all the blood's gone out of your forehead, out of the thinking neocortex, the part that works out problems. I know, it's freaking amazing. The blood's gone. You don't have a thinking brain in that moment. You only have a reptilian brain, which is the habitual brain, because now you're running on the survival brain, which is in the center of your head. It's called the mammalian brain, because all mammals have it. Reptiles don't have it. Birds don't have it. Mammals do. Because it's our survival response. It's helped us to run away, fight or hide. That's what the mammalian brain does for us. So blood flow goes there, and it goes to our habit brain at the back of our head, because that's where all the programs are. And I'm not talking about just the things that you learn from your parents or your grandparents. I'm talking about all the stuff that our species has memorized, and actually, it's like you're born with it, because it's what helped us survive over hundreds of thousands of years, right? That's what happens when you have a survival response. So you can't think because there's no blood flow to here. And you sort of feel all amped up, and your heart starts to pound, and you get hot. All of that is because the adrenaline hits your heart, and when adrenaline hits the heart, it makes the heart go faster. Your blood pressure rises, so you feel that pounding. And you might, I get hot. When I have a stress response, I feel heat. Because again, blood is going to the periphery. It's going to the parts of your body that need to run, fight or hide. And so your stomach squiluncles. Hi, Jose. Well, or maybe Jose. I apologize if I've said that wrong. Enjoy watching the replay. And if you've got questions, anybody, if you've got questions, please drop them. Because this stuff is It was so empowering for me to understand this. And so in my writing, I went into this detail because I thought, I want people to understand that this is visceral, it's real, we experience it. So you have all those feelings, right? You have this squealing gut that goes, ugh, stops working. You can't think. You feel hot. Your blood starts to pound and your heart rate elevates and all those things that we associate. But they are actually just feelings that you have in your body. Believe it or not, they're feelings, they're sensations. You could actually feel most of those in other circumstances and call it something else. But what happens is you put it all together, particularly if there's some stimulus, something going on in your world around you that you interpret as being a threat, and you say, I'm scared. And at that point it becomes an emotion. An emotion is a whole bunch of different physical sensations that we have, and we give it a name, and then it's an emotion. And that was a distinction that took me a long time to work out. Is that a feeling is a physical feeling, but it's us who says that's an emotion. I feel this about it. And that's not to say that our emotions are invalid at all. It's just that our emotions are always a bunch of physical sensations that we interpret as whatever. So I unpacked that because I wanted to make it real. I wanted to make it visceral and understandable. Oh, it's not just this idea when I have a thought and I think and my body responds to it. That's what it's like. Okay, so and we can have that in survival, but we can also have a very powerful thought that is wonderful and good, full of love and joy, and it can transport us to bliss in a moment. I've had that happen. So I know it's true because I've lived that. It's so much easier to go into survival than it is to go into bliss. But believe me, it's possible. So that was the piece that I did do from last week, is this translation, to pull these things across. And so then I thought, because this is the next piece, well, how come, and I mentioned it before, how come, because anyone who's reading this is going to say, okay, so that's really cool and I understand that. But how come, if that's the case, if our thoughts can have that downward causation into our body and we can have all of that, how come I'm not feeling like that all the time? Why is every thought not like that? And that's a really valid question. Because I did say, the thought's got to be strong enough, it's got to cross a threshold. And so that was the piece that I started unpacking today. And I was sitting there thinking, how am I going to explain this concept of threshold without getting really complicated? Because again, it's like, and even, it's at the edge of my own knowledge, because I am not a neuroscientist and I'm not a biologist either. But I do know that for a thought to even fire inside your brain, the stimulus from either outside of you or inside of you, and it can come from both places, has to be strong enough to make it fire. Otherwise, we'd just be, a mishmash of our brain would be firing all the time and we'd be crazy. There has to be something that makes the thought fire. And when I thought about what that is, it's either, the first one is that something new happens, because new things catch our attention. You're driving along on the road and everything's normal, and then you see a flashing light. It's different. It gets your attention. It's new. It's not normal. When you're learning something, the frontal lobe, the part of the brain that just gets turned off when you're in survival, the frontal lobe really loves to learn. It gets all engrossed in stuff. It just gets excited and, oh yeah, I'm into this. Whoa! But if there's nothing new, it literally switches off. There's no blood flow to the brain. Hi, Bernadette. No blood flow there. And hello, everybody. I can see you hopping on. I don't know who all you are, but it's lovely to have you with us. So, if it's new, if it's novel, if the experience is different, you're going to a new place, you're meeting new people, you are doing new tasks, it can be a challenge. But when it's new, it gets our attention. The other thing that can get our attention is something that's emotionally charged. And we all know what that's like. And I'll talk more about that in a minute, because this is how I ended up illustrating this problem. But whether the emotion is good or bad, if there is a strong emotion with it, it'll get our attention, right? These are the two things that I think of really obvious that's going to get our attention, that's going to make a thought fire, it's going to make our body respond. And the last one actually is when we decide to put our attention on something. be it good, be it bad, if you put your attention on it, well, then you notice it. This is about what we notice, remember. What causes the brain to fire? What makes the brain fire a thought that's powerful enough to make those neurotransmitters, to signal the chemical brain, to send the signal to the body, to send the signal to the cell, to make those proteins that affect the structure and function of our body? What makes it strong enough? And those are the things that make it strong enough. It's novel, it's new, it's unknown to us, good, bad, or otherwise. It's emotionally charged, like we have a memory about the thing, and something in our environment wakes up a memory about something that's painful or that's wonderful. Either way, we'll notice it. And third, we decide to put our attention on the thing. That's it, as far as I know. So we have to cross that threshold. In our brain, the thought has to fire. And then the thing is, I mean, you can have a crappy thought, but that doesn't mean your whole life's going to turn to rubbish, right? It takes more than one. It takes more than a few. So I was trying to think how to explain this. And again, I'm learning, I'm practicing. This is something that I am wiring in my brain. And it started off being really hard. It's getting a little easier now. But it's by no means automatic, and it'll become automatic in who knows how long, is to stay connected to the part of me that knows while I'm writing and trying to work my way through this. And sort of tune in, well, how would I explain this? And immediately in my mind, I see this picture, I have this idea of a group of friends, and you march up to meet a group of friends, and one of them just decides, because friends can be like this sometimes, to remind you and everybody else, at your expense, it's funny for everyone else, of all the times that you did something stupid or embarrassing in the last 5 years. I mean, isn't there somebody, we all relate to the situation when somebody is trying to get us annoyed, right? Even if you just grew up with a sibling, I mean, siblings are always trying to rack each other up. So that was the thought that came to my mind. I thought, okay, so let's tell a story of this so-called friend who tells, first embarrassing story, and it's like, oh yeah, okay. And the second story is like, hey, would you stop that? And that they're having too much fun. So they keep going and they tell another one, and by this time you're getting really pissed off, but you're still in control. And then they tell a fourth story. And this one is a really horrible, painful memory, and they make it into a joke. And at that point, you lose your rag. And, you tell them exactly what you think of them, and everyone is shocked, and you stomp off in a rage. Now, fair enough, any real friend wouldn't do that, but the point I'm making is that it was the repeated insult. Things escalated. And when the third story is still, you're thinking, oh God, I really hate this, but hopefully that'll be the last one. But because it was repeated, it carried on, and then it became emotionally charged. It was enough to push you over the edge. Now, if that person had told that last story first, perhaps it wouldn't have been enough to have you fly off the handle, because it's a horrible memory, but you haven't had the other three insults before that fourth one. Depends how horrible the memory is. If it's that bad, it might be enough. So you see the thing between repetition and emotional charge. Either one of those will ultimately get us to react. It's just the way it works, and for good as well as for bad. If you keep thinking a loving, kind thought about someone that you find difficult, for example, to start with, it's really hard to think, I'm just going to send them love. I'm just going to send them compassion. And you might, because it's not what you want to think and feel, but if you keep on doing it, eventually you will start to feel the way you think. It doesn't matter. It can be really, really hard. But the point I'm making is that eventually the brain will fire and the cell will start to respond. So that is the thing. We have to think a thought that has enough power behind it to get our body to respond. And that's pretty easy with the negative things, but with the positive things, you might have to work with it, because we've got to overcome all that other stuff. So I wrote that story, and I wrote some more things about the fact that it was the repetition that did it, and also it was the emotional charge, because those two are separate. You can have a single emotionally charged thing that's like a big explosion, and boom, you're just gone. You lose your rag with one thing that just happens, and it's like it lights a fire to something that's had petrol doused over it, and boom, all of the memories and everything that just comes up in you. And it's not just in your brain, right? It's in your body. Because remember, you have that thought, you have that thing fires, and all this chemistry goes to your body, and now you're having the same physical feelings in your body that you had the first time that thing had happened. And if it was bad enough, you'll react and go into survival. Because that's it's just you're in the same chemical state that you were the first time it happened. So that's how we can lose it with one stimulus, if it's strong enough, or if the thing that it wakes up in us is strong enough. That's why we can go from hero to zero, or zero to hero with one thought, if it's strong enough, or if we just keep on repeating it. In either direction, it can be good, it can be bad, it doesn't matter. Whatever we repeatedly think, we are going to repeatedly feel, and then we are creating ourselves. The odd thought, the odd whatever, doesn't matter. It's what we do most of the time that matters. And then I had a bit of an oh my God moment, just checking the time there, because I was thinking about, okay, so, those friends, they're pretty nasty friends. And then it was like, oh my God, these are the voices in our head. You know that the critical voice, the one that's always yelling at you, there's a proper name for that. And I've got to write some more about this. There's a real name for that, and it's called the default mode networks. And what the default mode networks are is those repetitive thoughts that you don't even notice you're thinking. But for me, anyway, they have been, and I've learned how to shut them off. And that's why I do my meditation process every morning. Because if I do that, I shut them off. The research has shown that if you can shut those guys up early in the morning, they stay shut up for the rest of the day, and it's true. And my default mode networks are really nasty, believe me. And really, if I don't have those guys quieted down, it's not a matter of putting them in a box and shutting them up. It's just turn them off. Then the thoughts in my head are about, no, you mustn't do that. It's very dangerous. You can never ever do that again. You really screwed that up. You must not ever do that again. I just remember what the thoughts in my brain were like. And it was endless. It was repetitive. They just go on and on and on and on, because it's become hardwired, because we thought and felt that way for so long, and we just think it's us and it's just normal, but it's not. So I understand about default mode networks, because I know what it was like when I finally started to turn my off. It's like, oh, you mean I don't have to feel that way all day long? Wow. I mean, I didn't even realize that to start with. But, that group of friends that sort of picks at us and, tells us the stories of our failures. It's inside our head. We don't need anybody else to do it. But of course, there are plenty of things and people and places outside of our own skin that remind us. And so I notice that, and I'm very conscious. And the more I look, the more I realize how many of those voices in my head are still talking on and on and on. Hi, Angie. Great to see you. So that's what I'm starting to unpack, is these default mode networks. And, the question of what pushes us over the threshold. There is one more piece to that I haven't written about. It's not just the thought that you have or whether you react. It's how often you do it, how strong it is. And we talked about repetition, and we talked about emotional charge. It's also how long you keep it going. And that's a whole nother piece that I'm not even sure how I'm going to tie it in yet. I haven't got there. But it's, how long, how strong, and how often is about whether our thoughts are creating our lives or not. So a single thought, if it's strong enough, can completely send us into whatever emotional state that relates to the thought. Doesn't matter, good or bad, a single thought can do it if it's strong enough. It doesn't have to be so strong if it's just repeated. You just repeat it, it's going to become one of those things, of those voices in your head that just tells you this is how it is. And you think and you feel, and you think and you feel, and on and on and on it goes. And so if you're thinking, what's this got to do with emotional addiction?
which is what I'm really unpacking, is what I really want to explain. Because until you understand how that process works, you don't know how to stop it, how to change it. Well, it's everything. I mean, that's the process. It's the on and on thinking and feeling that conditions our cells. I mean, we talked last week about how you've got receptors on your cells, and they actually adapt. If you keep hammering them with the same chemistry from the same thoughts going to your emotional brain and pouring it into your body, you keep hammering them, they get tired. They stop working. And yeah, you need to listen to last week if you didn't listen to last week, and you can explain. I lived that. Unfortunately, I learned how to unlive that, as in I actually healed my body from the problems that I created. So that's what we're talking about. That's what I've done this week. I have so enjoyed sharing this with you. If you're on YouTube, I thank you for watching and invite you to like and share and subscribe. And that's on Facebook too. If you would like to share this, that'd be cool. It's really cool information, and the God of Me project is about making this information available to lots of people in a really simple and accessible online format. I won't talk any more about it now. If you want to find out, please check the link in the description. Click on it. Go and have a look, because there's an about there, and it'll tell you exactly what I'm doing and why. And until next week, I send you lots of love, and I'll be back to tell you what I've written then. Until then, be well and pay attention to what you're thinking. Big love. Bye-bye.